On January 3rd, 1961, a nuclear explosion happened in the desert outside of Idaho Falls, Idaho. SL-1 was being prepared for restart after a shutdown of 11 days over the holidays. At 9:01 p.m., Rod 9 was suddenly withdrawn too far, causing SL-1 to go prompt critical instantly. In 4 milliseconds, the heat generated by the resulting enormous power excursion caused fuel inside the core to melt and explosively vaporize. The explosion knocked 2 operators onto the floor, killing one and severely injuring another. The number 7 shield plug from the top of the reactor vessel impaled the third man to the ceiling. All 3 men eventually succumbed to their injuries. 475 people took part in the cleanup. A total volume of 99,000 cubic feet of contaminated material was deposited and buried in the Idaho desert. To this day, many of the workers claim that ghosts roam the desert and the buildings located on this property. Stay tuned. Mystery Media Group presents Case File 40.
You are listening to Mystery Media Group.
Yay! Today we've got Stephen Mickelson. Tell us where you work and what you do.
I work out at the site, Idaho National Laboratories out of the desert there at one of the facilities out there. I'm currently my boiler operator. Before that, I was a maintenance guy. I did a lot of the environmental recovery and contamination work out there. And now I just do boiler systems. Got to deal a lot with those old buildings and all that fun stuff.
So I interviewed Stephen a couple of years ago for a folklore class that I was taking, and I chose to do stories on hauntings. And Stephen had some really good stories about hauntings that occurred out there. And I found them pretty fascinating, not only because they were good stories, but because I used to work out there also, and I knew a lot about some of the incidents and things that happened and kind of the history of the place. It's pretty fascinating how a small town like that was able to bring in this company and do such amazing things for, what would you call a nuclear race, the energy?
So they did like the nuclear energy innovation.
Or new ways of creating energy. So Steve, do you want to tell us about some of the hauntings?
Well, what did I tell you before? What was that? What did I have written down before?
There was the story about Admiral Rickover. I guess it's several people who work there say that his ghost walks around just checking on stuff. And for those of you who don't know who he is, let me give you a little introduction. He's quite the man, actually. And I could see why he'd want to be out there.
Power in the Navy, yeah.
Yeah, he was on the Times Magazine cover. I can't tell what year that says, but he was an admiral in the U.S. Navy. He directed the original development of naval nuclear propulsion and controlled its operations for 3 decades as the director of the U.S. Naval Reactors Office. In addition, he oversaw the development of the shipping port atomic power station, the world's first commercial pressurized water reactor, which is what I guess they used out there, correct?
EBR-1.
Yep. He was one of 4 people to have been awarded 2 congressional gold medals. He was known as the father of the nuclear Navy, and his influence on the Navy and its warships made him one of the Navy's most important officers. He served in the flag rank for nearly 30 years, ending his career as a 4-star admiral, and he served a total of 63 years of active duty service, making him the longest serving naval officer in the U.S. Armed Forces in history.
Was a father figure innovations for the Navy out there at the site for sure. For example, like he wanted to make that nuclear submarine out there, the Nautilus. If you ever watched that show, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The submarine on that was the Nautilus, and that's kind of where he got the idea for that one. And I luckily landed in Idaho for our sake on all that, and it was his baby to get be the first person to run a submarine under the northern polar ice caps.
Yeah,
and lined up in Russia. It was his dream, and there's a lot of people that stay. He says he still wanders out there and walks around. There's people see ghosts and stuff in that building, especially around site, and they think it's him. And it could be other people there because there's a lot of people that have been through that facility.
The Nautilus reactor core prototype is actually out there.
It is.
Definitely understand why he'd stick around. He put his entire life into that.
Oh, yeah. He did. He put his
doesn't want
career on the line to get that rolling. What's that?
He doesn't want you guys to screw it up, so he sticks around to make sure.
He's got working overtime out there.
So this is what was said. From time to time, people say they have seen or heard him walking around. I've heard stories and had a few experiences myself. Last summer, a couple of coworkers saw a figure in one of the windows. A man dressed in a white lab coat walked around, and when they approached the window, the man vanished. Later that week, one of my coworkers was walking through the building, checking on some equipment, and saw a person with white lab coat walking by. This person thought he was alone and went to see who it was. He found no one in that room, and that room only had one entrance to come in and out of. And then you said, on a personal note, I have had 3 encounters in this building. Do you remember those?
Yeah. Yeah, one of them was we were in there doing a maintenance tour, just kind of going through things that need to be fixed up and going through some process of, removing hazardous, asbestos and stuff like that out of the building. And as the process went along, there was a personage, whatever, walking across this catwalk that was up higher above us. And I saw it kind of in the corner of my eyes, and I was like, oh, that looks like somebody there. Then I didn't think much of it. I kind of kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to be the crazy guy. But later on, one of my guys that were in our group was like, hey, did you see the ghost walking across the catwalk up there? And another guy said he saw it too. So I'm like, yeah, I saw it too. So there was 3 of us on that incident when they saw a personage walking across the catwalk in the prototype training area.
So that probably makes you feel better that you weren't the only one who saw it.
Yeah, I was the only one there.
It's always nice to have someone corroborate your experience.
And I didn't see a whole lot on that incident other than I just kind of looked like a shadow. But, there was 2 other people that confirmed what I saw too on that incident. And then on another note, there was another time I went in there to go do some checks on some fire extinguishers. I had to make sure everything was properly, for all that stuff in check. And I was meeting a coworker over there to let me in, and I had to wait at the entrance for him before I could go in there. And as I was sitting by the door, there's a set of stairs that go up right there by the doorway, and I sounded like I heard somebody kind of shuffling their feet across the floor. And that's how this guy walks. He shuffled his feet across the floor like a choo-choo train, like that when he walks.
Gotcha.
And that's what it sounded like upstairs. If somebody was walking down the hall, shuffling their feet, and I yelled up. I'm like, hey, is that you up there? No response. Sat there for a second and listened, then yelled again. No response. And it went quiet for a second. And then I heard the same kind of shuffling again coming the other direction down the hallway. And then I yelled again, like, hey, is that you up there? No response. And then a few seconds later, the guy I was meeting comes to the front door. I'm like, oh, I thought you were upstairs. It sounded like it was you up there walking around. And he's like, there shouldn't be anybody else in here. It should just be us. And we went and looked around the entire building and never found anybody. So there was the incident of footsteps, there, people walking around, checking on the building, ghosts walking around, checking on the building. And the third incident in that building was the one that always gives me the most goosebumps. It always makes me, even right now, I'm kind of chilled. But I was putting some stuff away in a cabinet, up in this cabinet that we have for when we do other maintenance stuff around the building. And as I was putting the stuff up in this cabinet, I was like, oh, can I look over the side of my peripheral here? There was a person walking towards me. I'm like, oh. So I stepped forward to let him come by me, and I felt a brush, I felt somebody walk behind me. And as I looked the other way to see who it was, there was nobody there. I did a total 360 look all the way around me, and there was nobody in the room besides me. And so I shut the cabinet and I left. I'm out of here. Still this day, it gives me goosebumps every time I talk about that one.
That's a whole new ballpark when you actually feel something that's not.
Yeah.
Somebody brushed behind my back there. That was the interesting experience.
Yeah, for sure. In your opinion, would you say that this may have just been him walking around checking on things,
Very,
or?
very well. I mean, of all the stories you hear out there about, and everybody says it's Rick over that's still looking over his facility, over his baby. I mean, I never saw faces or personages other than like an image, just like the shape, the shadow, more or less. I mean, I couldn't tell you for sure. I couldn't put a face to anything, but.
Do your coworkers talk about this?
The people that I've talked to a little bit about this, I have an FM that's scared to death to go in there. He's a facilities manager. One of my bosses, he does not like going in there. He'll never go in alone. He takes 4 or 5 people with him. He never feels good about being in there. So I don't know if he's had any experiences in there. He hasn't said, but he just does not like going in there. The one time I did go in there with him, I just happened to walk around a corner the different direction than he did, and I came face to face with him, and he about hit the floor. It scared him so bad, So he doesn't like going in there.
I would say he's probably had some experiences then if he's that nervous about going in. But
you need to ask him about some of those experiences. Why he's so scared.
I've asked him, and he doesn't talk much about it. He's like, well, we want to bring that kind of drunk up. You don't want to talk about scary things, and things happen.
Sounds like mom.
Yeah.
So a lot of people there are hesitant to talk about these kind of experiences then, or?
No, not all of them. There's another coworker that I worked with, and he was up there doing some stuff at one time, and his story was that they were up there doing some surveys and checks, and then they heard some voices in another room, and they walked in there, and there was nobody in that room, but those voices were as clear as day, And then, like I said before, the lab coat guy, and then there's been other people say they've seen ghosts. There was a security guard, and this is actually a different building, that said they saw somebody running down this hallway, and as they stepped out of the way, the person disappeared out there. I mean, there's been a few other case stories that I've heard about stuff like that.
Have you heard any of the encounters being negative at all, or?
Nothing that I've heard of was any kind of like a confrontation of any sort, or any kind of get out of here, leave us alone, go away. None of that. It was just kind of more of almost maybe like a replay of something.
So like a residual type thing.
Yes, residual type thing. Like that people that have the admiral, like he did these things on a daily basis or whatever, walking around, and it's his residual walking, touring around the place and whatnot. I think I told you this at Christmas time. There was in our bathroom, in my locker room. I'll be up there in the middle of the night, and just at my locker, and the bathroom is 3 or 4 aisles over from where my locker is, and I'll hear the toilet flush, and occasionally the sink will turn on, and then I hear the paper towel dispense, like somebody just came through and did their business and did walk through and wash their hands and dried them off and left. There's nobody there. And when you brought up the point of residual, I'm wondering if I should look at the clock every time I hear that and see if it's around the same time. But
you should. I wonder if someone who was watching like the nuclear reactor or whatever at some time had a specific break every night and they used it to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
You should document that.
Yeah.
I should look at it a little closer next time I see it happen. Most of these incidents that I've been with or heard about, it seemed more like a residual act from a person that worked there before.
And that's the majority of what we find too when we investigate places.
So they did the same thing for 50 years and now they're still doing it? They're so used to it?
Sounds like they must have done something bad in their life if they're continue to do that for another 30 some odd years after they passed away.
I don't think they're still doing it. I think it's just the energy sticking around. And that brings up another point. So, we've heard that there are certain types of like limestone is supposed to hold onto energy. I wonder if the nuclear energy out there is the same type of thing. Like maybe it holds on to the residual energy better somehow and it just replays over and over. I don't know. It was just a thought.
Yeah,
I remember like the stone tape theory, I guess is what it's called.
Yeah. And then, but after being out there and stuff that I have to do is so repetitive day after day. You do the same thing day after day after day after day. And I could see how these people got in a routine. There was another time I went, that's one tunnel in another building I told you about, where the guard saw somebody running down there. I went down there one time because I heard that story. I'm like, I want to go check it out. So I went down there, went to all these rooms, and there was one room that I went into. that had a chair sitting in the middle of the room, and the chair was just spinning ever so slowly, like it was just barely moving, but it was spinning. That's kind of weird. I don't know. But for the rest of that year, every time I went this one corner of the building, felt like somebody was watching me. Ever since then, I interrupted somebody's napping there or whatever, some ghost nap or whatever, but watched me ever since.
You work for the government. They're always watching.
They're always watching. Big Brother's always paying attention. There's more truth to that than you know.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Maybe that's how they're watching, is they are using ghosts.
They hired the ghosts to do it, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds very logical and reasonable.
In exchange, let's say they got Scooby snacks for them to get around.
So let's talk about, there was a nuclear accident that happened out there on January 3rd, 1961. The SL-1 was being prepared for a restart after a shutdown of 11 days over the holidays. The maintenance procedure required that rod 9 be manually withdrawn a few inches to reconnect it to its drive mechanism. And the only reason I know anything about it is because of this book that you told me to read.
I read that book too.
It's good. It's called Idaho Falls, The Untold Story of America's First Nuclear Accident. And then we did learn a little bit about it when we worked out there, just in case something happened again, we had to be prepared. But anyway, Just tell us what you know.
All I really know is what that book has said, and a handful of other people that have worked with a little bit about it. Apparently the SL-1, it was a prototype for the Army that they were using to try to create a sub-low level energy portable reactor so they could take it out into the field and generate their bases and stuff like that out in the field. And apparently rod 9, I think is what you said, kept getting stuck. It was not moving up and down like it should. Apparently, I don't know much about this. That's something I don't deal with, but the rod's supposed to move up and down nice and smooth, and this rod would get stuck. And it sounded like these guys that were working on that had to like manually shove it down, pull it up, and to kind of give it a big tug or whatever. And when that rod was not moving, he gave it a really good tug and pulled it out farther than it should have. And after it hit air, just rocketed it up, pinning him to the roof.
Yeah, it said that it withdrew too far, and within 4 milliseconds, the heat generated by the resulting enormous power excursion caused fuel inside the core to melt and explosively vaporize.
And all the water vaporized. And
there was like 10,000 pounds of pressure.
Yeah, something like that. So the one guy that was pulling on the rod, he got stuck to the roof. The rod impelled him and stuck him to the roof.
Yep.
And apparently, when the people got there, they did find one of the guys alive.
Yeah.
He didn't last very long, from what I gathered, and they stuck him in an ambulance to take him away. And then some of the higher ups were like, "Stop the car, get out, get away from him, just leave him in the car." And the people the driver and the nurse that were in that ambulance had such a high dose radiation from that guy that they had, I think they ended up getting cancer and stuff like that down the road and had complications because of that.
Yeah.
A lot of the people that went in that building had some major complications after that. They had very short stay times to get in and out of there for the longest time. I don't know if this is true, but this is just stuff out of that book, that ambulance is out there somewhere in a vault. There's a lot of water and stuff that they use to clean this guy up that's out there still in a vault. There's still a lot of that crap from that area is still sitting out there somewhere encased in concrete, waiting to be processed to somewhere long term if it ever happens. Most of my information came from that book.
Yeah.
Isn't that guy still out there too?
I believe so. From what that book said, the bodies of those 3 of the people are out there. The only part of the body that went back home to be buried was the head, and they were stuck in a very heavy lead encased coffin. That's it. All it says in that book there too. Yeah,
they talked about so it set the alarm off when the explosion happened, and I think 9 firefighters came. And when they started climbing the stairs, they didn't notice anything off the bat. They could still see coffee sitting on the counter, and the guys' lab coats were all hanging there and everything. And they didn't think anything of it. And the other weird thing was that there had just been a false alarm the day before. So they had just assumed it was another false alarm. And they weren't real prepared when they went in. And then all of a sudden their meters started going off, and they're like, that's kind of weird. And as they climbed up a little bit further, the meters went off again, but they still opened the door to see just to make sure. And then that's when they noticed, I think they said they noticed 2 of the bodies, but they didn't notice the one that had been pinned to the ceiling or something like that. And so then they called them health physicists, and they came in with their masks and tanks and stuff. So they were prepared to come in and handle the situation. It was really hard to see. The visibility was so low that they ended up spending a lot more time in there than they should have to find the bodies. And they found the one guy that was alive.
As they went in there, they had to do like what they call stage time. They went in and did as much as they could in that time, and they had to hurry and come back out.
Yep. But apparently one guy was like, I'm not leaving him here. So he stayed with him because he was still alive.
Yeah. And he was one of the older guys, it sounded like. And yes, he did end up getting cancer, but he was older that he didn't.
It took him a while to be able to get the guy that was still alive. His name was McKinley out, but they put him in an ambulance. The nurse that was on duty was in the back of the ambulance with him and the driver, and they were headed to the hospital. And although it was a bad tragedy, they learned a lot from it, I guess, and were able to come up with some better protocols for everybody that now works out there, which we're grateful for, although nothing has happened since.
Yeah, so that's where the Navy ended up taking over the whole nuclear program for reactors because of that incident. That's all under the Navy's jurisdiction now for military-graded reactors.
You know, Melissa?
Yeah.
If that wasn't so radioactive, that should be in Zach's museum.
Yeah, no kidding.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, I'm sure he's tried to get it.
I'm sure he has.
One thing that I found interesting, Michael, was when they were trying to remove the body of the poor gentleman that had been pinned to the ceiling, they had to get this 5 by 20 foot stretcher that attached from the ground. And this stretcher rig actually came from Army volunteers out at Dugway. They brought it in because they had one and they had been practicing with it and stuff. And they brought it in to help.
Practicing what?
Rescue attempts or something.
From people stuck to the ceiling?
I don't know. Removing people from buildings? I have no idea.
But can you imagine if something shot a rod of steel through that kind of roof? You'd have to probably slide the body down the rod. How on earth would you pull that out of a ceiling?
Or take him off in pieces. I don't know.
They'd still have to pull it through, though.
Mike and I were just out by Dugway this weekend, so that's why I mentioned that. That was interesting.
Dugway is where they have all the chemical warfare type stuff, right?
Yeah.
They do all that disease research.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff out there. We can go into that in another episode, Mike.
Oh, yeah, I'm excited to do that episode.
I've heard that was fun. The Dugway place is kind of like the Army's version of the Area 51.
Yeah, they call it the new Area 52.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy, but it's actually a lot bigger than the existing Area 51. So I can imagine that this event caused a lot of energy that would result in possibly some more hauntings. And in hauntings, I don't mean like ghosts and chains walking around, but energy that would be stuck around from an event. And how old are these buildings? They were built during the Cold War, or was it before that?
S1W prototype for the Nautilus was built early 1950s, I think. I'm not sure exactly.
That sounds about right. Yeah. But, during its time, it was revolutionary and people were excited. The first town that was powered by nuclear energy was Atomic City, Anarco.
Population 6,
and
where they ride their lawnmowers over to get a beer.
In Atomic City, there's 6 people that live there.
Yep. And they have a bar and 3 or 4 apartments or whatever, rental cabins or something they have there.
They have a raceway too, like a dirt
racetrack. They do have
a dirt racetrack.
We watched the lady get on her lawnmower and drive it across the street to the bar and get off and go in.
Yeah, from her trailer.
From her trailer across the street.
Dressed in her moo-moo.
All right.
But it was, it was exciting. And people didn't know exactly, all the ramifications from the nuclear energy. But at the time, it was really exciting that we were coming up with some new ways to provide energy that had never happened before. So Idaho Falls was a booming town and people were moving out there and big things were happening during that time. And
one book you just talked about talks a lot about the SL1 thing. And I know on PBS, if you go on their PBS website, there is a movie about the Rickover and his project out there with that.
Yeah.
And there was another one about the SL1 on PBS. And the EBR1 reactor, the reactor we were talking about that powered Arco and Atomic City in that area, that's a museum now that you can go out there and see. And I know it's open from Memorial Day to Labor Day.
Yeah, I've been to that museum. It's pretty cool.
One that's sitting outside is massive.
It's huge.
There's two of them out there. They're giant. And
holy cow, you'd never get it off the ground.
You read some of those articles about those engines and those jet planes that had to be like 3 times the size of a B-52 bomber.
Yeah.
To hold that engine and keep it shielded enough, not kill the crew. Oh,
that's insane.
Crew, I guess you would say.
You know, I can imagine that a lot of people that worked out there they felt like, you know, this is a good thing. Like, we're excited to get this program going. And if they are sticking around, maybe it's because they still feel like it's a good thing that they're trying to do for the betterment of humankind. But, you know, Mike and I talk about this all the time. Why do ghosts stick around? Why do hauntings happen? And, you know, we always say if it was me and I was able to stick around, I'd go to the place where I like to be.
Yeah.
So,
I imagine where you'd like to be was that at work.
Maybe these people enjoyed it.
Liked it.
Some
or
people,
a dirty, creepy old basement.
I mean, I enjoy a dirty, creepy old basement. I'd love to.
I do too, but we're weird. I don't want to spend forever there.
And I actually do enjoy work because I have my own office and can shut the door and people leave me alone.
Like the creepy basement, like growing up, I always thought that room that had like all the canned goods in was haunted.
We just said the same thing.
We were just
like going into that room.
We were just talking about that. We felt the same way.
I can go into the room where the washer and dryer were, and I could go dig through all that crap there. But as soon as Mom told me to go get something out of there, I'm like,
nope.
Okay, and I was in and out fast as I could possibly go.
I still don't like going in that room.
Yeah,
I don't like it.
That was weird. And then you guys always told me about cattle mutilations, and I never wanted to go out. And I always thought when I looked out in the field, there's going to be a green alien guy standing out there. So
you'd be so lucky to see a green alien standing out there.
No kidding.
No, but I went out there flying my little jet plane when I was, 10 years old, whatever it was, and I heard a bobcat scream behind the field out there by the canal, and I thought it was the aliens coming after me. And
well, a bobcat scream is pretty terrifying.
And it made it was to this day still kind of screechy, scary.
Steve, I don't know if you remember, but one time, so we, you know how we were always hearing noises down there, and we tell Mom there was monkeys down there or whatever. We didn't want to go downstairs, and she'd always brush us off and say, "Just go get, whatever."
Yeah, but she was scared of the basement too.
But one time she was like
looking behind her.
Yeah,
when she came up.
One time she was like, "Okay, there's something down there. We got to go check it out." And we all armed ourselves. Do you remember that? And all went down together.
I had that little fork gun.
Yeah.
I was going to shoot a cork at it, whatever it was.
Somebody had a baseball bat. Yeah. We had like
badminton brush club.
We had like football helmets and baseball helmets on.
Garbage can lid.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we never did find anything.
More likely it was mice. Mice were always, we had so many mice in that den.
Well, and that's what Mom thought too, but she's like, that had to have been one hell of a big mouse because of the noise it made, but who knows?
Yep.
We never found out. Finally, she believed us.
Anymore.
Yeah. Kind of some cool stories about the buildings that you work in. And I think it's interesting that other people that work out there with you have had similar experiences, same type of things happen to them.
Yeah, I'm sure there's been more stories too, but I haven't heard all of them. And I don't think that's necessarily a subject all of us like to talk about too. Like, oh, that's a crazy guy. He knows there's ghosts out there.
Well, that's weird. I mean, that's all I would talk about if it were me.
That's our favorite subject.
I know.
It's not about Bigfoots. I'm not interested.
Speaking of, do you think there's any radioactive Bigfoots out there?
If there is, I don't know. I don't let us out of the fence much.
So I've heard
kind of like when we go to work, we get stuck in prison.
I've heard that there's a lot of lava tunnels out there. Is that true?
I have never been out. I don't get to go very far outside the fence when I do get to go out there, but I've heard that there's tons and tons of lava tubes. One of the guys in my old ward, he was site security out there. He just barely got started, and one of the guys he was talking to was telling him about all these tunnels and caves, and there's places that they're not supposed to go to either. But I've never been out there. I've never seen it. I don't know a whole lot about it. See lots of elk and lots of antelope out there all the time.
Do they have two heads?
Not yet. Yeah.
I remember one guy that I used to work with would be like, you don't want to go out to the site. There's always weird animals walking around with 2 heads and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what? Are you serious?
Yeah. There's some jackrabbits out there that are size of pit bulls.
That's insane. They're eating the stuff left over from Pit 9, huh?
I guess.
If you enjoy our show, please like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. We will be introducing other Mystery Media Group guests in our upcoming episodes, along with weekly bonus material. If you'd like to see more pictures and evidence from our adventures, visit www.destination-mystery.com. You'll find a link to our blog, as well as a link for merch and contact information. Until next time, find your own destination.
Solve the mystery.
This is a production of Mystery Media Group.
Yay!